Okay guys, next thing to do on my bike is check the valve clearance here and just around the intakes. And then it's open. And I'm looking at my rear cylinder head, so I'm going to take the cover off first of all. Three. Okay, the cover is off, and here you can see the chain and sprockets. Both sprockets are the same, with the same marks. The same mark for intake and exhaust. Let me see if I can zoom further in. As you can see, this is the chain, cam chain, the cam sprocket, and here you can see an in mark, and underneath there is an X mark. Same marks are on the other sprocket. That's the furthest away one, because the sprocket on top is a balance sprocket, and that's only on the rear cylinder on the RSV1000. So that makes it a bit harder to see the marks on the last cylinder, but this line is the exhaust cam and this is the intake cam. So to get my cylinder in TDC, I need to make the in cam and in sprocket on the mark in, and that should be in neutral. That should point to the other sprocket, and at that point there is an X mark on the exhaust cam on here that shows the X marking also in horizontal position. Okay, I have my bike in, I think, 4th or 5th gear now, and I'm pulling my or pushing my rear tire. Yeah, there it goes. And you can see the cams are moving further. It's almost there. Just a couple of, okay, it's about where it should go. Now when we look, you can see the markings here, the in, so the X behind that balance sprocket should be in horizontal. And I can show you the cams are now in opposite position. And you can see, here you see one pointing forward. Now you can see the other one is pointing backwards. So at this point we can check for valve clearance. The cylinder is at TDC, so I could measure all cams and all clearance. This is my exhaust cam. The clearance here should be between 0.22 and 0.28, and the intake cam, it should be between 0.11 and 0.18. There are 4 cam heads. This is one, and the other one is below this cap, and that's on the intake as well. There's one here and there's one below. These outer ones are easily measurable. This is 0.12. This is but that's the exhaust one. Exhaust you should measure with 0.22, but it's just for an example. Let's do this on the intake cam. Like so here. It fits. I think it's exactly 0.12. A couple of times there's a little bit of oil on the blades, and then it's. You should measure all of the cam heads for intake and exhaust. Okay, the top cover of the front cylinder is off. Took me some effort because I'm going to show you above. There are some bolts, but the difficult one is against the radiator. I don't know if I can show it, but there is that bolt and you can't reach it. What I did was to get some clearance in the radiator. I removed the bolts from the radiator. That was enough, could create enough space to get the fan off my radiator, and that way I had clearance to take the bolt out. To get the valve cover off, I had to unloosen the intake the intake manifold is loose. The two clamps, one in here and one on the one here and one down there, and then I lifted the intake up, and then there was enough room to get the cover off. So now I'm gonna set the head at TDC, and it's not at this moment, so I hope I can show you. There's the, and you can see at the front cylinder that there is no balance sprocket on them. So in this case we could, if we were small and are able to look behind that corner, we can put it at TDC and the marks should face each other horizontal. The cams should point at 180 degrees out. So I'm turning the rear wheel again in fifth gear, I think, and then I will put the thing on TDC. There is the mark. It's the this is the in cam, and further to the front that's the exhale exhaust cam. You can see it's on TDC, and now the cams are pointing outside 180 degrees. Okay. I'm gonna measure the intake cam on this one first, and that has a clearance of .11, between .11 and .18 millimeters. So first of all, can you see it's number 10? Gonna measure it number 10. It's going fairly easy. So my measurement tool is shifting with steps of 0.02. So the next one is 12. It's 0.12 millimeters. So again, let's see, that's going in easy. Okay guys, I measured all the valve clearances. This is my back cylinder, is my front cylinder. These are the specs per cam, like so, and this one, and you can see here I measured .22 just within specs, and that's for both exhaust cams, exhaust valves on the exhaust cam. I measured 0.12 and 0.10. 0.10 is too tight, and here as well I measured 0.10 on an intake, 0.13, 0.23 and 0.23. So I have to change both of those clearances. I have to change them, and that means I have to lift the cams out and replace the shims. So it's another part of my RSV meal experience. In my case, I already unbolted the chain guide that was positioned here. Next thing to do is mark the sprocket and the chains. Okay, next thing to do is to get the intake off the injector house. Have to disconnect some lines and connectors, throttle cables, also some connectors in here. I had some lines or connectors or what I need to disconnect or is already disconnected. I labeled them with colors so that I took some pictures so that I can't mistake by placing it back. So next thing to do is to get some lines off, connectors loose, and take injector housing off. Okay, what I just did, it's a bit an unorthodox way, but the cam chain tensioner is a hydraulic plunger, and it's about a finger deep in the cylinder here. The trouble is you should reach it somewhere behind the this is a coolant manifold. I have to detach it to reach the cam tensioner, and it's a hell of a way to do. So I learned from someone else that you could zip lock the chain to the cam gears, then disconnect the bolts of the cam gears both ways. I had a line on my machine so that the chain doesn't fall into the cylinder, and when the gears are off you could pull the chain and gears outwards, and then it's loosened from the cams. So that's what I'm gonna do. I zip locked the chain to the gears very tight. Now I can shift these upwards piece by piece, and then like so. This one is all already. That's fairly easy. Here it is. These are off. So now I could again, gears are off, again unlock these bolts, then the cams are out, and I could take the buckets out and change the shims, put all things back together. Great job. So I released the bolts of the cam holders, and I just took one cam out. Here you can see the buckets, and I thought there was some wearing, but it's a bit of oil. You can see there there's no wearings. So now I'm gonna put a rag in here, so when I take the bucket out, and the shim will stick to the bucket and won't fall into the motor by accident. So that's the next thing. Well, you can see here, these are the bolt. You place the bolts in, and these little holes are oil drainage holes. That's where, when oil pressure is, oil will spit out on the cams to lubricate the engine inside. So this is magnetic. See, shim is inside the bucket. It sticks to the bucket Next thing to do, where the camshafts off, we have the shims out and the buckets off. Next thing to do is, according to the clearance, calculate how thick or thin the shims should be. Place new shims in, put the buckets back on, then place the cams back in, then rearrange everything. So I'll do this piece by piece. First of all, I'm gonna put the shim and bucket in. That's the shim. And put the buckets back on where you took them off. So if you took the bucket from this valve, don't place it back there or there. Place it back on this valve again. So here's the shim. On the stem, bucket, there's where the shim fits underneath the bucket. Look for any scratches or something, but so this bucket goes back on here. So all 4 buckets are back on. Then a piece of cloth can be taken away. Put some paste on the buckets, and then the camshafts can be put back in. So let's see. There's a cam. I put some Kluber paste on it. It's high pressure grease, especially for valves. Let's see if I can put it back easily. Just a sip of oil. And do this for the front as well. There's a bit of oil on it already, I can see that. Okay. Like so. It's just engine oil. Here we go. That's it. I looped the camshafts already, so I can place this back on this way. Yeah. Okay. Okay, the cams are back in. This is called a U-bolt, I think, but it's a cam support. It's back in. It's tightened to the right torque. Next thing to do for me is to put the cam gear with the chain back on. Since I looped the cam, it's easy to rotate. But my piston is still in its correct position. I didn't move it, so when I put the gears back on the exact spot as where they came from, the cams are in the right position. So let's take a look if I can put back my gears. Okay, try to put back the gears and the chain back on, but let's see this. This is a chain guard, and in here, let me see if I can put an extra light. In there, you can see. And then I will take one bolt off, put the Loctite on it, bolt it back, put it on the amount of torque. Next step. So do that for D3, and when I've done D3 bolts, I can do only single one. Let me see if I can show you better. And this one I could reach with a wrench, so hopefully with a torque wrench as well. Then I will bolt this one to the correct spec, then push the gears around so that this bolt will end up here. Take the bolt out, put Loctite on it, and bolt it to the right spec, and for the last as well. Last bolts. Put some re-drop. That's enough. Thread lock on it. Then torque wrench. It's the right torque. Okay, that's it. So at this point I already had the rear cover, valve cover back on, but I'm going to show you later on how to do that because the front is the same way. Next thing is to put the chain guide, the upper chain guide. Here we go, that's the first one. That's the second one, just to make sure. Okay. So now the head is ready. If you see something, debris or whatever, take it off, and then we're gonna do the cover. Put a little bit of, you can't see, but silicone sealant underneath the bolt areas, so that the rubber sealant is sticking on the cover head. Now let's see, it's a very tight fit in this bike, but when the engine is in the frame, So the cover is on. Securing the bolts. This is a tricky one. I can show you. 5 volts. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. This one is a hell of a thing, but the biggest hell of all is the one there. But what I did is released the radiator and pushed it away. Got my fan out of the way. The fan is bolted right here, and there you can see there's the last bolt.